Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely mind-bending collision of human psychology, physics, and, well, fear. Have you ever walked into a room and inexplicably felt like prey, or maybe just kind of defensive for no reason? Well, researchers at the University of Oxford decided to figure out exactly why our brains do this, and the experiment they designed to test it, it's literally fascinating. I mean, it sounds like the setup to a sci-fi thriller, right? Can artificially losing about 10 inches of height actually make you think strangers are out to get you? It's a very Black Mirror-esque premise, but the answer is incredibly revealing. We're going to dive right into the surprisingly hilarious yet rigorously scientific answer to that exact question. And by the end of this explainer, you might just find yourself standing a little bit taller.
Section 1. The Paranoia Pyramid.
Okay, so to understand this, we've got to look at how the human brain scales fear. At the bottom of the paranoia hierarchy, you've got basic social evaluative concerns. Basically, this is your everyday anxiety, fears of rejection, feeling vulnerable, or just a vague sense that the world is kind of dangerous. But as you move up the pyramid, things escalate. You get what psychologists call ideas of reference, like thinking people are talking about you. Further up, it becomes a moderate threat, where you feel people are going out of their way to get at you. And at the very peak, severe threat, thinking people are trying to cause you significant physical or psychological harm. It's a pyramid, right? It all builds right on top of that foundational layer of everyday vulnerability.
So where exactly does height come in? Well, science shows that height is actually a very well-established marker of social dominance. The researchers note that taller people are literally more likely to have achieved higher education, hold jobs of higher status, earn more money, and report higher levels of well-being. Simply put, physical stature is naturally linked to where we subconsciously feel we sit on that social pyramid. So the question is, if you feel physically smaller, do you suddenly feel socially weaker? To figure that out, the researchers needed to manipulate someone's height without them knowing. And to do that, they came up with a brilliantly quirky methodology.
Section 2. The VR tube ride. All right, let's look at this setup. The researchers built a fully immersive virtual reality simulation of a London Underground train. Participants actually put on a VR headset and stepped into a carriage populated by, well, somewhat blocky, early 2000s-looking computer avatars. They were physically able to move and interact in this space, creating a startlingly real sense of presence inside the digital tube station. Let's quickly break down the exact parameters here. The researchers recruited 60 adult female participants. Now, these participants had a history of mild paranoid thinking over the past month, but no severe mental illness. They placed them on this virtual train journey that lasted exactly 6 minutes, complete with stops and background tube noises to make it feel real. Inside the carriage were 23 neutral computer avatars. But here's the real kicker. The avatars were specifically programmed to look back at the participant. If you looked at an avatar, it would hold your gaze for anywhere from 1.5 to 3 seconds before looking away. It was perfectly designed to feel intensely real and, honestly, slightly uncomfortable.
Section 3. The Shrinking Experiment.
Okay, here is where the researchers introduced an incredible sci-fi twist. Every single participant actually took the exact same virtual tube ride twice. On one of the rides, their perspective was perfectly matched to their normal real-world height. But on the other ride, without telling the participants at all, the researchers secretly altered their virtual perspective. They literally dropped their eye level. They shrunk the participants by exactly 25 centimeters. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the height of an adult human head. And remember, they were absolutely not told their height had been altered. They were simply asked to experience the VR twice and then report back on their thoughts and reactions.
Section 4. Feeling short, feeling hunted.
The reactions were immediate and totally visceral. One participant noted, "I was frustrated to feel like a child again, felt out of place on the tube because I was not an adult." I mean, this perfectly highlights the awkward relatability of feeling physically inferior, right? Even against virtual characters with no real facial expressions, a lower camera angle made grown women feel completely out of place on public transit. But it didn't stop at just feeling awkward. Another participant reported that the man with the legs in the aisle was acting in a hostile way towards me. Just think about that for a second. The digital blocks were programmed to do the exact same thing on both rides. But suddenly, the moment the participant was shrunk, those neutral pixels were immediately interpreted as a genuine threat.
This brilliantly illustrates exactly what we were talking about earlier with the paranoia pyramid. Another participant said there was a girl who kept putting her hand to her face. The man with the blue t-shirt was shaking his head at me. They were staring.
Just by dropping their eye level by a few inches, the researchers triggered a wild leap from basic social anxiety straight up to ideas of persecution. The participants felt physically vulnerable, so their brains literally invented a narrative where the fake people around them were being hostile. And, of course, we can ground those quotes in hard data. The researchers used a specific state social paranoia scale. When participants rode at their normal height, their mean paranoia score was 12.1. But when their height was artificially lowered, that score spiked to 14.1. This wasn't just a fluke, it was a statistically significant increase. Being shorter literally manufactured paranoia. Section 5. Why height matters. So why exactly does this happen? Well, the researchers ran the data through a statistical test called mediation. Basically, they wanted to know, does simply being shorter directly cause paranoia? Actually, the answer is no. It's a 3-step process. Step 1, your physical height is lowered. Step 2, this physical change makes you feel inferior to the people around you. And then step 3, that feeling of inferiority causes the paranoia. So the shrinking itself doesn't make you paranoid, feeling less than does. Which brings us to a critical psychological concept called social comparison. This is basically how we evaluate ourselves in relation to others. Are we inferior or superior? Are we weak or strong? Desirable or undesirable? The data showed that the 25-centimeter drop in VR made participants rate themselves far more negatively compared to the digital avatars around them. They felt weaker and more incompetent just because they were physically looking up at people. So, the absolutely crucial point here is this. Negative social comparison is a direct cause of mistrust. When we feel physically and socially vulnerable, when we look around and subconsciously decide we're the weakest person in the room, our brains just start working overtime. We anticipate threats to protect ourselves. Paranoia isn't just a random occurrence. It builds upon our own perceived vulnerabilities. If you feel small, the world literally feels dangerous. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Think about your daily life for a second. Does your physical posture or your literal height in a room silently dictate your daily social anxieties? The next time you feel a wave of mistrust or think someone is glaring at you, ask yourself, is the threat real or are you just feeling a little bit small today? Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the architecture of paranoia, and I really hope this changes how you view the world and your height in it.